We interrupt this record to bring you a special bulletin. The reports of a flying saucer hovering over the city have been confirmed.
Did you really go out with an alien? Uh-huh. What was it like? Real different.
Becoming Human, a Mork and Mindy podcast. Hello listeners, this is Paula Schaffner with episode 86, Midas Mork. This first aired on April 15th, 1982. The IMDb synopsis is, Mork learns the secret of turning polyester into gold. Which is sort of what happens, but not exactly. This was the 12th episode directed by Bob Claver. It was the 7th written by Wendy Kaut, and the 6th written by George Zadislow. There's a nighttime exterior of the house with snow on the ground. Mork and Mindy enter their bedroom to applause that includes cheers and whistles. He's in his usual red and white nightshirt and nightcap, while she's in light blue pajamas. So like I said, she has many sets of nightwear this season. They're each carrying a glass of milk, while she's also carrying a plate of cookies. They sit at the head of the bed. She says she loves this part of the day when they get a few hours to themselves. Although we'll soon learn that it's actually nighttime. In fact, it may even be after midnight. He says, yeah. And then he says, you know what would make it really perfect? Little Pooter Precious. So that nickname that was recently expanded. So it's not just Little Pooter, it's Little Pooter Precious.
Not again.
Oh, come on. We came so close last time.
Oh, all right.
Yay.
I want you to know this is the third time since the 11 o'clock news.
Oh, yeah. Oh. All right, yay.
Okay. At a four-way stop, who has the right of way?
Let's see. Any vehicle driven by a teamster.
So they're doing a double entendre thing here where they're basically trying to make us think that Mork is very horny when he's actually hoping to practice for his driving test. So this is a follow-up to the Drive She Said episode. He still doesn't have his license. This is dropped. It's just for this bit of this scene. We still don't know when he gets his license yet. And there's a reference to the Teamsters who were associated with some kind of sketchy behavior, let's say, kind of mob behavior. She tells him that with answers like that, he's never going to get his license. And he says at least he'd be able to get seated in a restaurant where the maitre d' goes, you want to sit down now? And he does that thing where his hand bends his nose, so implying the mob, basically. She asks if he can be serious for a minute. He says certainly, and she says okay. Mirth, who's also in his red and white nightshirt and cap, knocks on their open door with his teddy, and as we saw before, Teddy is flat. This applause also includes whistles and cheers. He tells Mommy and Daddy he can't sleep. The neighbors are so noisy. He asks, by the way, what does cheap floozy mean? The neighbors, who Mirth apparently can hear fighting when he's in the attic, are presumably arguing about the husband cheating on the wife. Mindy tells him never mind, because she's not going to explain this to their child. She suggests he lie down next to Daddy, but Mirth doesn't want to. He acts like Teddy can see and smell the cookies. He goes over to them. Mirth says maybe he will lie down with Daddy because he's hoping to get the cookies. Mindy tells Mirth that he has two choices. They can finish the story they started at nap time and he can go to bed, or he can just go to bed. Mirth thinks the choice is pretty obvious. She gets out of bed and goes over to the bookcase. Mirth gets into the middle of the bed. Mork says, well, they're having fun. He's going to try and find out why half the people on the road found it and the other half never lost it. This was a reference to a bumper sticker that was popular in the 70s, and it was created by the Christian group Campus Crusade for Christ. I vaguely remember those bumper stickers.
Hand signals, we have a, let's see, right turn, left turn, ethnic neighborhood. Right on, for sure, totally, maybe we don't know. See.
Okay.
You turn, not me. You turn.
Mork does his hand signals, and he does one for the ethnic neighborhood, and one for right on, and one for sure, and one for totally. He puns on U-turn. Mindy calls Mirth sweetheart and asks if he's ready. He says yes, and Teddy is listening too. She starts reading aloud that the maiden told Rumpelstiltskin that the king would behead her if she didn't spin all the straw into gold by dawn. Rumpelstiltskin offered to save her in exchange for her firstborn child. I never really thought about it before, but that's a really disturbing story to read to a small child, or a large young child in this case. A different shot shows that the title of the book is From Castles in the Clouds, and there's a castle on the cover that's blue-washed. This book was published January 1st, 1980. It features Bible stories from both the Old and New Testaments, followed by related contemporary tales featuring the Muffin family. And the subtitle is actually The Muffin Family Picture Bible. And in the foreground, which you can't see as well on the TV, shows two children making sandcastles at the beach. Yeah, there's an odd Christian undertone to part of this episode. Mirth tells Mommy that he's heard this story so many times. He says that that's where the maiden remembers Rumpelstiltskin's name and marries the prince. End of story. Mork looks worried and asks Mindy if that's how it ends. She says she's afraid so. Mork is mad that Mirth ruined the story for him, so he didn't want spoilers. He threatens to tell what he knows about Santa. Mindy scolds him. Mork gives in. Mirth wants to tell Mommy something very honestly. These fairy tales are for babies. Technically, Mirth is still a baby, but he's also sort of a kindergartner, but he's also a third grader. Who knows anymore? Mirth really feels that he's progressed to Joseph Wambaugh. We may have had a reference to Joseph Wambaugh before. He's written fictional and non-fictional accounts of police work in the United States. He's still alive as of this recording at the age of 87. In 1982, he'd only written, it looks like, about half a dozen books, but apparently was well known enough to be referenced. She tells him that when she was a little girl, she couldn't get enough of fairy tales. She used to dream that she could spin straw out of gold so she could be a princess and live in a big castle. Apparently the beheading part didn't really discourage her.
Get ready for a real winner now, son.
It was a beautiful castle. And I had my very own white stallion named Snowball. Or, no, it was Snowflake. Or, well, something like that. Something to do with winter. Anyway, we would ride Snowflake or Snowball or whatever his name was to the neighboring castle where Ricky Nelson, who was the neighboring prince, lived. Ricky Nelson and I would get on Snowflake and go... These stories aren't so bad. I'm a riot at bridal showers.
We see here again that Mork doesn't want to hear one of her rambling stories. This one has a white stallion named something to do with winter, and there's probably a Freudian interpretation of that. We had the episode where Mindy, who was originally born in 1956, and then they changed that so she was born in 1953, now apparently had a crush on Ricky Nelson, who was a teen idol in the 50s. Perhaps she became a fan around the time of Garden Party in 1972, but it's still a stretch. Her story puts them to sleep. She again feels that her stories are not boring, and she claims to be a riot at bridal showers, although she probably hasn't been to a bridal shower in a long while. She takes the comforter out of the room, so this sets up when and where she's going to have her dream. Because, spoiler alert, although the IMDb synopsis doesn't say this, and it's not immediately clear in the episode, the next few scenes are going to all be a dream. Sorry, spoiler. There's no transition. We just go to a close-up of a chemistry set with brightly colored liquid bubbling. Mork calls Mirth's son and wants him to add 1 cup of Fadich, but don't be too liberal with it. And there should also be a little bit of Nipkeys. And then he wants Mirth to add a kosher salami. A lot of religion stuff in here. It's not in the subtitles, but Mork uses a Yiddish word he's used before, kenahara, which is basically warding off the evil eye, so that ties in with the kosher salami. Fred lets himself in without knocking. He calls to Mirth. This applause also includes whistles and cheers, but it's briefer than for the others. Fred tells Mirth his grandpops has done it again, so he doesn't mind that nickname of grandpops. He says he got a couple of tickets to the Ice Capades. He says, of course, he had to go to a scalper, so then, predictably, Mork says that Fred has gone to one for years, and he acts out Fred's scalp being shaved. Mork and Mirth both laugh. Before I realized that this was a dream, because it had been a while since I'd seen it, I thought, that doesn't seem like Fred to break the law and buy tickets through a scalper, but one, they need that pun about his baldness, and two, it's a hint that these characters are going to gradually become more out of character as the dream goes on. Fred irritably says that that's very funny. Then he notices their setup and says this is a pretty sophisticated piece of equipment. He asks what they're doing. Mirth says they're making gold for Mommy. Fred says, "You're making gold?" Mirth says, "What did I just get through saying?" Fred is amused, and this is one of these things where it's like Conrad Janis is having such a good time that he forgets when Fred is supposed to be confused or stern or whatever. Mirth tells him, "You've got to learn to pay attention, Grandpops." Fred tells Mirth that nobody can make gold. That's why it's $400 an ounce. The current price, by the way, would be $2,600. Mork scoffs at this because it's not like it's mustard or sand, and we knew that sand is the form of Orcan currency, although I don't remember mustard coming up. And interestingly, he calls Fred Dad rather than Pops in that instance. Mork has been taking his goggles on and off, but now Mirth tells his daddy that's ready, so Mork puts the goggles back on. So Mirth is actually paying more attention to safety than his father is. Mork asks Pops to borrow his tie. Fred says, "My what?" And then Mirth again claims that Fred isn't listening. Fred goes in the kitchen, takes off his tie, and hands it to Mork. Again, if this were what passes for real life on the show, then Fred would question this more. I don't know what they're called, but they're like large tweezers that are used in science. Mork holds the tie with those. He says he's about to take this bargain basement tie and turn it into pure gold. He's assuming that this is a very cheap tie. Mork is sure that it'll work. He dips the tie in and says to give it 5 seconds. Then he counts an Orcan. Then he takes out the now very tattered tie. Fred says Mork may be his son-in-law, but think about this. Fred has never taken a picture with him. And therefore, he can deny he ever knew him, or he could bury Mork and it wouldn't be tied to him. Wasn't sure exactly how that was meant. He tells Mirth that it's time to go, and he tells Mork, "See you later, Goldfinger," referring to the James Bond character. Mirth leaves as he is in his lab coat and goggles, but Fred does take down Mirth's blue jacket from the coat hooks, so he's being a good grandfather. As Fred and Mirth leave, Mirth tells Daddy not to sweat it. Mork wonders what went wrong, and then he realizes that this cheap tie is actually pure silk. And the recipe calls for polyester, which you know from the IMDb synopsis. So he very happily gets a green potholder. He pleads with it, and he's worried that he might lose his government grant, and then he says there are no more government grants, so who cares? And he throws the potholder in. And I wasn't sure if that was a reference to government cuts in scientific grants, or if that's what's happening in the world of Mindy's dream. Again, I wasn't sure how to take that.
Yes. Yay! I've done it! They didn't believe me. I did it. We're filthy rich. We'll never have to pay taxes again.
You bought this mansion?
We made 3 tons of gold. We could have bought Zambia.
Wow.
Yes. This is a downstairs reading room. Upstairs, we have periodicals and books by the Wallace family.
The studio audience is very happy for him. I don't think that they know it's a dream sequence yet. Mork says he'll be filthy rich and he'll never have to pay taxes again. I wish that there had been more of that sort of satirical humor in the episode, but I'll discuss that more when we get there. And then we see a limousine and a bit of the house that Mork has purchased. This felt a little half-hearted. I know that they had stock footage of impressive homes at Paramount Studios, and we learn that Mork has made 3 tons of gold, which would have bought Zambia. Mork and Mindy go into the downstairs reading room, and we can see that there's a chandelier out in the hallway. This room has blue accents, like on the wingback chairs. Mork says that upstairs they have books by the Wallace family. This is reference to Irving Wallace, his wife Sylvia, his daughter Amy, and his son David, who went by the family's original last name of Walachinsky. They were all writers. 3 of them collaborated on the Book of Lists series, which I used to own. There were also novels and histories and other formats among them. Mindy says it's huge. She's never seen a room with a horizon before. And we don't actually see an impressively large room, but I guess we're supposed to imagine that this is just a very small portion of it. He says she's probably wondering how he gets the books down from the top shelf of the bookcase. She jokes that it's with their helicopter. He says close, but no banana. He rings a crystal bell, waits, and then bellows, "Yo, Miss Beasley!" The subtitles say Ms., MS period, but the end credits say Miss Beasley. A very tall, thin woman who wears glasses and has her hair in a bun comes in a lavender blouse and skirt. Her head barely clears the doorway. She suggests to Mr. McConnell, so again confirmation that Mork goes by Mindy's last name, a little poetry. She reaches for the top shelf. She suggests D.H. Lawrence, E. Cummings, and B.B. King. Lawrence was more known for novels. E. Cummings obviously was a poet, and B.B. King was a musician, and the joke here is that they all have names that are initials. He says not today, but maybe tomorrow they'll play a little one-on-one and 1.5. She's so much taller. They high-five, and he has to hold his hand pretty high. There's a cut to Mindy looking nervously amused. Miss Beasley exits. I'll just mention right now, IMDb does not list birth or death dates, but it says that her height is 6'8" 3/4. Her first credit was on the Tim Conway Show in 1980. Her most recent role was in 7 episodes of a Norwegian show called Side om Side from 2013 to 2023, and she doesn't have many credits in between. Mork asked Mindy if he should show her the zoo now or later. There's a lot about their wealth that we don't see. There's things going on outside, and that's an example. And in fact, there's now the sound of a jet roaring overhead, and Mindy ducks. She asks what that was, and he says probably just the chef taking the gardeners home. And when the staff comes in a short while later, we won't see anybody who looks like a chef or a gardener. She says, "We have a jet?" And he modestly says, "Well." She says this is all so much for anyone to have. And I noticed her voice echoes, but I wasn't sure if that was done deliberately to make us think that the room is even larger or if it was a recording issue. She wonders why she feels guilty about not feeling guilty. He calls her Mind a few times, and then my little waspette, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant female. Although she's Polish, so she's not totally wasp. He says for the first time in their entire relationship, he can provide for her and fund public television. He wants her to humor him. At this point, Mork is rich, but he is generous and modest and considerate. And it's implied liberal because he supports public television. And it's interesting that after her financially supporting him for over 3.5 years, he wants to turn around and be able to provide for her. She says the house is too big for just the 3 of them. She doesn't know how she's going to keep it up. I thought that was interesting because there has been a shift over the years to Mork doing more of the housework, and he is the one staying home with the child and filling the homemaker role, and that's come up again and again, including the recent episode where he had curlers in his hair. So now it's like she thinks that she's going to have to take care of the house. He tells her she just needs to reach out and touch someone, so a reference to the phone ad of the time. He says help is just a little tinkle away. Then he rings a bell that looks like it's made out of brass. He waits, and then he bellows, "Yo, staff!" And they all come filing in, and based on their outfits, there is a butler, Miss Beasley, 3 maids, a chauffeur, an older woman who might be a housekeeper, a jockey, a doctor, and a jester. Mork and Mindy are now standing. Mork calls her honey and insists she inspect them. She says she can't. She feels like the border patrol. And I wasn't sure if that was a racist comment, exactly how she meant that. He says, "Mind, you're the lady of the house. The least she can do is look down her nose at them." The modest Mork of a few minutes ago is already fading away, and he is embracing snobbery. And of course he referred to them as staff, collectively rather than individually. She slowly goes down the line and tells them she's happy to meet all of them, and she's looking forward to getting to know each and every one of them personally, which will not happen in this episode, but there's a few that are treated as individuals. She gets to the end of the line and is very surprised to see the court jester. Mork says it was so hard to find one without a hump, the hunchback court jester. We saw him as a court jester in the episode where he went to the alternative universe. Mork says the jester has great references. He used to work for Marshal Tito. That was the communist president of Yugoslavia from 1953 until 1980. I don't know much about him, but I'm assuming that because he was a communist, he was considered to not have a sense of humor. Mork thanks everyone and tells them to grab a straw and go down to the swamp. And I had this double take moment. It's like, is this a drain the swamp joke? I don't know what that means. Why are they putting a straw in the swamp? As they file out, Mork calls Mindy honey and says that the staff loves him. They really do. We can already see Mork losing his humility. The Jester is the last to go, and he crashes into the door, then gets back up sort of acrobatically, and then he exits. And I could have included a clip with it, but it just wasn't that impressive. Mork laughs and says it's so hard to find good wit nowadays, because he's enjoying the slapstick. Mindy doesn't know if she's going to be able to get used to all this. Mork takes her hands and calls her honey. He says they're the same people they were when they lived in that little tiny cracker box apartment. And the very fact that he calls it that shows that he has already changed. It was never that small an apartment, even by TV standards. Although obviously it's smaller than a mansion. Mirth enters in white overalls, a white shirt, and a white sweater draped preppily over his shoulders. He asks Mommy to play a couple sets of tennis. So he's not going to go into a tennis outfit, but he will wear a white version of his usual outfit. He's got a racket in a Spalding case. Mork asks where the girl is that he hired to teach Mirth tennis.
Tracy? Tracy, come on in. Come on, take big steps.
You hired Tracy Austin to teach Mirth, huh?
Tracy?
Come on, Mirth, I'll show you how to blink back the tears when the line calls go against you.
It spoils things to have Mindy jokingly guess that it's Tracy Austin, but the audience, of course, is very impressed. We notice that she's also carrying a Spalding racket. She has only one line. She is okay. I mean, she's not really an actress. And then Mindy helpfully tells us that that's the #1 woman player in the world. Tracy Austin is credited as playing herself. She was then 19. She's still alive as of this recording, and she was a very young tennis superstar. Mork says that they were getting murdered in the doubles, so he had to do something. Then he says, come on, hun. He's got Arnold Schwarzenegger waiting in the gym to give her a massage. Schwarzenegger was well known as an athlete, not so much as an actor, although he'd done a few movies. Not yet a politician. I won't go into this too much, but Schwarzenegger has been accused of sexual harassment and admitted to it. So the line about him wanting to give Mindy a massage is creepier than it would have been in 1982. And then Mork escorts Mindy out of the room with his arm around her waist. There's no transition after the commercial break.
Hey, King.
Excellent move, sir. I didn't see that coming.
Oh, please, Quentin. Are you kidding? Mr. Magoo would have seen that one coming. Why did you do that, Quentin? You let me win, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
Why did you let me win?
I value my job, sir. As someday I dream of opening my own truck rental agency.
The game is over.
Great game, ladies and gentlemen. Good.
I have to say that the set is the best part of this, but at least it gives the performers playing the staff a little more to do. We find out that the butler is named Quentin, and he is the one on the staff who actually has the most lines. He was played by George Pentecost, who was then 42 and died in 2003. He had had 2 earlier roles on Mork Mindy in the first season. He also did 1 appearance each on Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley, but his main Carrie Marshall connection is that he was one of the regulars on Blansky's Beauties in 1977. Otherwise, his career ran from 74 to 93. He's fine in this role. I mean, it's not a memorable butler role, but he gets the job done. Mirth references Mr. Magoo, which is pretty much before his time. We find out that Quentin let Mirth win, and he values this job, and he someday dreams of opening his own truck rental agency. I guess he's saving up at this job he doesn't want to lose, but he's already got his plan for afterwards. As the staff exits, Quentin offers Mirth a before-dinner Bosco. Mirth refuses because he thinks that Quentin just likes to say the word Bosco. This is a Laverne and Shirley connection, conscious or not, because Lenny and Squiggy in more than one episode really like Bosco. And again, it's something that is pretty much before Mirth's time. They still make Bosco even now, but it definitely was not as well known in the 80s as in the 50s. After Quentin leaves, Merce says he doesn't like him. Mindy enters in a very elegant red and gold and silver gown that I will talk about a little bit more in a bit, and the audience oohs and ahs over it. She asks Mirth what's wrong. He tells Mommy that he's bored. He's been all over this place, all the rooms. He's tired, and he misses Daddy. She says, I know, sweetheart, I do too. But she's going to talk to him about spending more time with them. Merce says as a backup, he has an appointment with Daddy for Tuesday in his office. Then he's worried that he won't be able to find Daddy's office, and then he exits. Mindy looks worried. Quentin comes back in and tells Madam that there's a gentleman here to see you. This gentleman is called Pops, which is odd because Fred wouldn't have introduced himself that way unless he was waiting to talk to Mork, unless, well, again, he's becoming increasingly out of character. Quentin makes a face in disgust. Mindy says, great, send him in. Quentin still looks disapproving, so she insists. Then Quentin calls to Pops. Fred enters in a huge, shaggy, dark fur coat. He calls her sweetheart and asks how she is. Then he wonders where that genius son-in-law of his is. Mindy asks if Mork bought him that coat. He says he guesses so because he found it in the trunk of the rolls that Mork gave him. He takes up the coat and his white scarf, draping them on a chair. And they could have had him hand them to Quentin or another servant, but probably just wanted to simplify that part of the scene. Mindy wonders if everybody is going crazy around here, so another hint that this is not reality. He calls her honey again and says he knows exactly what she's thinking. He brought her up to appreciate the simple things in life, but she needs to understand, at the time, he was poor and stupid. Fred in this world is selling out. And I'll talk about this later, what Mindy as a child wanted. She says this has gone too far. He should look at them, especially Mork. And she doesn't say anything that bad about Mork, but he says, how dare you talk about Mork that way? She looks stunned.
Thank you, Thomas. Come back around 5. We might need a ride to the front door. Don't bother washing it. We'll buy another one. Oh, Min, darling, how are you? Big kiss. Poppy, how are you? How are you?
Hello, son. How are you?
Ah, not too bad, though. I lost $100,000 today.
Oh, stock market?
No, hole in my pants. Oh, hon, time to play a little game again. Right hand or left hand? Come on.
Oh, Mork, not again.
Oh, come on. You know how it makes me feel. Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on.
Okay. The right one.
Behold. Oh, there we go. Little oyster droppings here. There we are, huh?
Oh, what a guy. Honey, I've always told you it's just as easy to marry a rich alien as it is to marry a poor graduate student.
The audience really likes Mork in his 70s Elvis outfit. The vehicle, I don't know if it's like a modified golf cart or what it's supposed to be, has 2 M's on it, and I assume that those both stand for Mork. So it could be Mork McConnell, I guess. And we find out that the chauffeur is named Thomas. Mork uses the big kiss catchphrase, but here it's just an air kiss. It's not even a peck. He calls Fred Poppy. He lost $100,000, and the joke about the stock market, but actually it was just through a hole in his pants. He bought Mindy pearls, and he refers to them as oyster droppings because he's so wealthy that even pearls aren't that impressive. Fred says that it's like he always told Mindy, it's easier to marry a rich alien than a poor grad student. And that's a variation on especially poor immigrant mothers are supposed to say it's as easy to marry a rich man as a poor man. Wasn't sure why grad student came up. Now Mork calls him Popo. Mindy tells Mork they have to talk. She doesn't want his presence, she wants him. She says buying things isn't the answer to everything. He says neither is penicillin, but it sure helps a strep throat. She says a minute ago she walked in here and Mirth was playing human checkers, although it was more than a minute at this point. And she thinks this is awful because it's dehumanizing. He thinks it's awful because he is worried that Quentin beat Mirth, even though he told Quentin to lose or he can go back to being Gaddafi's food taster. I'm not sure if this is the first reference to Gaddafi, but Muammar Gaddafi was in office from 1979 to 2011. Mork tries to ring 4 bells that are on the mantelpiece, but they're all duds. So this time he just yells, yo, not even a name or a job title. Mindy covers his mouth for a moment. She says this is what she's talking about. A blonde in a blue mini dress enters with a tray, and apparently she's a manicurist. Mork speaks to her in mock Swedish, and she smiles. Then they both sit. Mindy goes to her dad and asks him to talk to Mork. Fred sits next to the manicurist and calls Mork son. He says that Mork is the man of the house now, and he thinks Mork should run it any way he wants. So I thought that was interesting because there's been this thing going on all season that Mork is the man of the house and what do gender roles mean now that they're married and have things changed and so on. Fred is definitely not a feminist character, but he has seemed to consider Mindy to be more of the head of the house if there is one. But again, Fred has changed and this is not reality. Mindy sarcastically thanks him. She tells Mork they're going to have to talk about this later because she's got to get changed to go to work. And it's never explained why she's in this dress, if this is just what she's wearing around the house. Mork says he resigned her, meaning he quit on her behalf. She asks about her career. He says that if it means that much to her, he'll just have to buy NBC. Fred stands and says Mork will do that because he bought Fred the New York Philharmonic. Mork says he knew Bernstein had his price, meaning Leonard Bernstein.
I don't want things just handed to me. I want to work for my career, for my success.
Well, once you have NBC, you'll have to earn every penny. Du verkar min öje. Du så vilka rinner bekaje verkar. Olga, vi vet till det, looking good.
As a child, Mindy believed in fairy tales about making gold, marrying a prince, and living in a castle, but her father also raised her to want the simple things in life. Also, as she got older, and we saw this come up at her high school reunion and the flashback, she wanted to have a career. She wanted to strive and achieve. She doesn't really want all this wealth, and she also just wants to work for a living and prove herself. And we get more of Mork bashing NBC, which was trailing the ratings, although Mork Mindy itself was not doing that well that year. And we get more of Mork pretending to speak Swedish, and we find out that the manicurist, who is not listed in the credits since she doesn't have any lines, is named Olga. Mindy wonders about Mirth because they can't raise a normal child in this environment. And I found that doubly ironic, first of all, because Mirth is not a normal child anyway, and secondly because Robin Williams came from a wealthy background and that shaped who he was and definitely made him, let us say, not normal in various ways. Mork says next week he's going to send Mirth to a school in Switzerland. Mindy says now Mork has gone too far. Mork says if that's too far, they could send him to a school in England, since England is closer than Switzerland. Mindy kneels and takes his hand. She says, listen to me. This is not a happy home. It's not their home. She wants to go back to their apartment. He calls her hun and says this is their home. I don't know how much time has passed. I guess in her dream she hasn't given up the apartment. She's able to move back in. Maybe they didn't break their lease. She stands and says it might be his home, but not for her and Mirth. She walks away. He stands and goes to her. He calls her hun again and asks where she's going, even though she just said. She says she's going home to their little cracker box apartment. This time she's throwing those words back at him. She doesn't actually think of it as a cracker box apartment. She takes off the pearls and hands them to him. He begs her to wait. After she exits, he says she can't go now. J.D. Salinger's coming over to shoot the bull. And I think that's because J.D. Salinger was such a reclusive writer. And we can hear a door closing off stage. Mork turns and says, she's gone, Pops. Fred says, she'll get over it. There was a point in this episode where I thought, this is a dream, isn't it? But I wasn't sure whose it was because Mindy is off screen for much of it. In an actual dream, you're usually in every scene. But it is different with TV dreams, of course. Fred grabs his fur coat and his scarf and he exits. So I think that's why he didn't give them to his servant, because that would have slowed things down to have to get it back. He calls to Pops to reason with her, and he wants Fred to tell her that opportunity rings only once unless you're Neil Sedaka. And I think that's a reference to how Sedaka made a comeback in the 70s. In fact, there's a Captain Tennille song with the refrain, Sedaka is back. Oh, and looking on the internet, he had an album in 1974 called Sedaka's Back. Quentin enters from stage left. He asks if there's anything else. Mork wants to fly down to Rio because it's carnival time. They'll put on big heads and try to get in the car. Quentin says he would love to do that, but this is the day he spends with his family. Well, he's getting a late start on it, I'd have to say, but then again, a dream, so it doesn't make sense. Mork says, oh, that's right. He tells him to take care and have a good day. Quentin says, good day, sir. Mork tells him to say hello to Carmelita, and he says, I certainly will, sir. And I don't know if that's supposed to be funny that the butler has a Latina wife, I guess? Or girlfriend? Mork looks around the empty room. He yells hello, and it echoes. He tosses the pearls onto a square of the carpet, and we get an overhead shot. He plays hopscotch and picks up the necklace. Then he twirls it, and he looks very lonely. We again don't get an exterior, and we're back in the apartment. Mirth is in his typical overalls, and earlier when he was doing the human chess, he was dressed like a prep school kid. Mindy is in denim and plaid. Mirth is helping her iron. He says self-reliance is fine, but he misses being waited on hand and foot. She says she misses Daddy. He misses Daddy too, but even more he misses being waited on hand and foot. She says that's not very nice. He says he doesn't care if it's very nice. He's spoiled rotten, and he knows that. And he says that there's no time for sensitivity. She's taken the shirt away. She walks it into the bedroom. He plays with the iron as if he's trying to burn a pattern into the board. Mork comes in the front door in more of a usual outfit for him. Mirth starts to react, but Mork shushes him. They hug. Mindy comes back into the room and is very happy to see Mork. So it seems like he wanted to happily surprise Mindy that he has returned to her. She hugs him and says that she knew he'd come back. She knew he'd listen to her and realize that love is what makes their world go round. She hugs him again and kisses him. He says, well, actually it's real close because he came back to tell her that he's going around the world with his new love. They could have just had him not come back or have him call, but they wanted to go for more of an emotional impact, and they also wanted to go for a sight gag. He goes to the door and opens it to reveal Miss Beasley, who's now wearing diamonds and a very long brown fur coat. He says not only is she intelligent and well-read, she can spike a volleyball from here to Key West. Miss Beasley kisses him on the top of his head. There's a cut to Mindy and Mirth looking stunned. He says, Kareem, eat your heart out, which I think is not the first reference to Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, basketball player. Presumably they couldn't think of a volleyball player. She exits and he barks. Not the thing of, oh, she's an ugly dog, but like he's a dog, a scoundrel. Then he exits, closing the door behind him. Mirth sobs to Mommy and they hug. Then there's a sudden cut to Mindy on the couch under the comforter, and Mirth is again calling her Mommy, but he's trying to wake her. She bolts upright. Mork is pouring orange juice, and he says he had to have Mirth wake her because she was snoring so loud he thought she'd blow her adenoids across the room, and I think that's at least the second or third time that we've heard that Mindy snores. She's in the blue pajamas from before, but Mork and Mirth are dressed for the day in typical outfits, so I assume this is the next morning. She says, Mork, you're back. I mean, you're home. And he says, why wouldn't he be? His name's on the mailbox, his clothes are in the closet, and his hair's on the soap. Not very romantic, but just kind of the everyday thing of what home means to him. Mork sits down and sets down the 2 glasses of orange juice, and she says she had such a weird dream. She dreamed that they lived in a big mansion with butlers and maids and Tracy Austin. So apparently Tracy Austin wasn't just training Mirth in tennis, she actually lived there. She says that Mork left them. Technically, Mindy left Mork first when she left the mansion and came back to the apartment, but he's the one who left for good. Mork says he could never leave her. With her, his life has meaning, and without her, he'd be just another alien forced to do his own laundry. Again, I don't know who's doing housework in this world. She says it was just a silly dream. She dreamed Mork could turn polyester into gold. Mork and Mirth laugh at that. Mork says it's impossible to make gold, but diamonds are a snap. He stands and tells Mirth to go in the garage and get those charcoal briquettes, so another reference to the garage. He tells Mindy to warm up the waffle iron, and he'll go get his oil of Olay. Mindy leaps off the couch and runs to block the front door. She says she doesn't want any diamonds or gold. He says, oh, and then after a pause, he says, how about some French toast? In the previous episode, Mork told Milt that Mindy calls him her little waffle iron, and so there's again stuff about breakfast food. There's a nighttime exterior of the house. Mork summons Orson. In his mind, he's reclining with a silver sleep mask over his eyes. He calls Orson the potentate of pasta, which I kind of like. Orson says, laying down on the job again, Mork? Mork sits up a bit and takes off the mask. He says he's just getting in the mood for a report on dreams, a wonderful aspect of Earth behavior. He says that dreams are little messages that appear in an Earthling's mind when he's sleeping. He says because it's generic, although of course this was an episode about a woman dreaming. He says that dreams come fast and furious, and of course that didn't yet have the association with the movie series, and sometimes they're out of sequence, like a Fellini film. And then he speaks Italian as a man, a woman, and a car.
They can take you to wonderful, strange places. They can haunt you. They can thrill you.
I see.
He's demonstrating different emotions that you might have in a dream, but he's also making it sound like a movie trailer. Orson calls this another frivolous Earth activity, like marching bands. Mork says, oh no, sir. Dreams allow one to imagine strange and wonderful things. The most precious dreams of all are the ones that give you hope for tomorrow. And he wishes him sweet dreams as part of the sign-off. It seems odd that dreams haven't come up as a topic before. I don't get the impression that orcans don't dream, but maybe it's one of those things that they suppress. Music starts like a music box that's playing a lullaby. Mork lies down again, and it fades to darkness and silence before the credits show up. Well, what do you know? It's another season 4 episode that does not live up to its potential. I rate each of these episodes on a 0 to 4 egg scale, which measures how well it delivers what I'm looking for in the series. This was sort of flat, although the energy was okay. It could have done a lot more with satire about wealth and greed in the early Reagan era. It could have just really given us opulence on a grander scale, at least with some more stock footage. It could have had a celebrity, who is more exciting than Tracy Austin. It could have done more, but it's not awful. It was pleasant. It was nice to see the costumes, and I said I would talk about the one that Mindy is wearing because although I don't watch this episode very often, every time I do, I go, oh, it's the dress from the Three's Company episode Up in the Air. And here's a clip.
This is Jack Tripper, the Jack Tripper.
Oh, how do you do? I'm David Winthrop. David is Nancy. Nancy is very beautiful. How do you do?
That episode would not air until May 4th of 1982, but it would go on to be one of the most fondly remembered episodes of Three's Company, and it would nudge John Ritter into a long-deserved Emmy Award. It's worn by a character who we'd never see again, but it serves to add to the setting of a fancy dinner party thrown by a young man who lives on an island. Here, it's just a symbol of how Mindy is having to live up to Mork's ideas about wealth. And for all I know, this episode was filmed before it, Up in the Air, but whenever I see Mindy in it, and it does look good on her. I mean, no offense, it's a lovely dress, and it suits her, but I always feel like it's a little bit of a hand-me-down because it is worn on a better episode. This episode, I did laugh a few times, but it just felt really off to me. And in general, I like dream episodes. It gives some variety, takes us out of the usual setting of a sitcom, but it just didn't even make dream sense to me. I mean, I guess the dream is sort of about Mindy's insecurities and her fear that Mork may leave her for somebody. Also just trying to reconcile what's going on with her marriage, with the household budget, with who is the head of the household, what her role is, what Mork's role is, how this affects Mirth. As a little girl, she fantasized about money. I mean, obviously, she had opportunities to date and even marry men who could provide more money, but that's not what's important to her. She loves Mork for who she is and how he makes her feel. And that brings us to the 0 to 4 heart scale, which measures how well it supports and promotes the romantic relationship of Mork and Mindy. And yes, ultimately, Mork affirms that he wants to be with her, even if it's partly for laundry. But it just didn't feel like a shippy episode, and not just because he leaves her in her dream. There's some mild affection, but they are in bed, and she's helping him study for his driving exam 3 or 4 times in one night. Not romantic. So I'm going to go with a 1 out of 4 on that. Is the episode skippable? Sort of. There's not much happens here that you need to see, but I guess it's sort of taking some of the themes and issues of this season and kind of distilling them into this unresolved dream of Mindy's. I had talked about how in season 2 things got very bizarre. This season, they haven't gotten as bizarre as you would think because of the whole Mirth thing, and it's actually been mostly pretty domestic. I mean, there's been some sci-fi elements, of course, but we're still putting the unreal into a box, which is different than in season 2, where Mork really did shrink down to nothing, and he and Mindy really were abducted by sex pot aliens. We are told in this episode that Mork would not actually be able to make gold, that can only happen in fantasy. So that's an interesting containment of that. I don't know that I would necessarily like it better if it had actually happened. It wasn't all just a dream. It still would feel a little bit clunky and plot holey. It would have landed us in a different place. And there are only 5 episodes after this. They will shake things up. This episode isn't about that. It is nice to see Fred again, even if he is deliberately out of character. The guest stars are okay. I mean, it wasn't really anything memorable with that. But it is above average. It's on a level with a lot of this season. Oh, and I should mention that the title drops Midas, which is a reference to the king who could turn everything to gold and then live to regret it. And that is a different take on gold than the Rapunzel legend. Of course, the irony is that Mork in Mindy's dream is happy. She and Mirth are the ones who are miserable. As with the previous episode, things get maybe darker than intended. 2.5 eggs, 1 heart. This is Paula Schaffner with Midas Mork. All is not gold that glitters. Pleasure seems sweet, but proves a glass of bitters. Oliver Goldsmith, ironically named She Stoops to Conquer.
Thank you for coming home. Sorry that the chairs are all warm. I left them here, I could have sworn. These are my salad days, slowly being eaten away. Just another play for today. Oh, but I'm